All right, the question on everyone's mind, what's on your radar today, Kim?
Well, on April 17th, Gonzalo Lira, an American-Chilean journalist married to a Ukrainian woman living with their children in Kharkiv, Ukraine, disappeared after posting this ominous message to Twitter. You want to learn the truth about the Zelensky regime? Google these names. If you haven't heard from me in 12 hours or more, put my name on this list. The list of names include Volodymyr Struk, the mayor of Kreminna, a town in Donbass. Struk was kidnapped from his home and shot in the heart for what has been described as pro-Russian separatist activities. Nestor Shufrich is a Ukrainian parliamentarian and politician who refused to condemn Russia's actions in Crimea and the Donbass. He was later arrested for allegedly providing the invading Russian military with locations and other intel about the defending Ukrainian army. Yan Taksur is a 70-year-old Ukrainian journalist, satirist, and critic who was detained in early March also for allegedly holding pro-Russian views. The list goes on. Lira was scheduled to appear on former British MP George Galloway's television program called The Mother of All Talk Shows when Galloway announced he couldn't conduct the interview because Lira was nowhere to be found. Lira's family and friends then confirmed that he had not had any contact with him since April 15th. So who is Gonzalo Lira and why is he controversial? Well, Gonzalo Lira is an American-born and mostly raised in the United States to Chilean parents. He is a direct descendant of Jose Miguel Carrera, the first president of Chile. He's a YouTuber who made his name in what is dubbed the manosphere, which is basically an opposition to the feminist movement. He later focused on economics and politics. Living in Ukraine with his wife and Ukrainian children, Lira began making YouTube videos about the Russian invasion that were counter to what the Western media and Ukrainian media were reporting. He's been very critical of the Zelensky government and of U.S. diplomat Victoria Nuland, whom he accuses of orchestrating Euromaidan in 2014. In late March, the Daily Beast actually published a piece on Gonzalo Lira titled, "How a Sleazy American Dating Coach Became a Pro-Putin Shill in Ukraine." And in the piece, the Daily Beast summarized Lira's claims, saying he calls Zelensky a cokehead who uses his people as shields, has provided arms to criminals who have terrorized the streets of Kiev, and has possibly deliberately tried to have a nuclear accident to pin it on Russia and possibly drag America into his war. They say Lira has portrayed the Russian assault as provoked and as one of the most brilliant invasions in military history. Now, the Beast says Lira has insisted that the invaders don't want to harm civilians or civilian infrastructure and are in fact taking pains not to, that the Russian advance has not stalled, but is in fact right on course. Now, rather than dispute the claims Lira has made about the war, the Daily Beast instead focused the bulk of its piece on his past dating tips and manosphere content in an effort to discredit him. The Daily Beast ran this piece knowing both the Russians and Ukrainians were detaining dissenters. At the time, Gonzalo Lira didn't have a massive following, so it's curious why they focus on him at all. On top of this, they knew Gonzalo Lira was not just an American on American soil, but a dissenter living in Ukraine where he'd be subject to arrest for holding such views. Yet nonetheless, despite the known risks to Lira personally, the outlet that prides itself on holding the moral high ground ran the piece anyway. And sure enough, a mere couple of weeks later, Gonzalo Lira went missing. For an entire week, Lira was nowhere to be found. His family worried, journalists calling attention to his disappearance. Chilean embassies and consulates around the world reported hundreds and thousands of calls and messages asking about Lira's fate. But luckily, on April 22nd, Gonzalo Lira surfaced alive. And it turns out he had been detained by the SBU, which was the Ukrainian KGB before the fall of the Soviet Union. It's their secret intelligence services. Here he is on Richard Medhurst's show discussing what happened to him.
Everybody was worried. You were set to appear on George Galloway's show, and then you didn't show up, and people were saying all sorts of things. You yourself, you said that if we don't hear from you within 12 hours, that you've likely been picked up by the SBU, which are the Ukrainian security services. Is that what happened? Were you picked up by the SBU?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And legally, for the time being, I can't discuss the period from the time I was detained. I was detained on April 15th at around, I do believe around 1:20 p.m., or roughly around that time. And I cannot discuss in any detail whatsoever that period, that lost week, if you will. I can say that they sent 8 guys that were heavily armed.
Oh, really?
That's kind of flattering. Yeah, you know. And me, middle-aged, unarmed, and 8 heavily armed men. Yeah, I felt, very flattered. But no, seriously, I can't talk about it. I actually signed a document that I understand that in the law in Ukraine during a period of investigation, you can't discuss anything that has gone on during this period of time. And so I am going to abide by that rule.
Yeah. So there you have it. Gonzalo Lira has been found alive. So Emily and Ryan, I want to ask you guys about this in particular with the Daily Beast and them running this story, kind of knowing that now they've been under a lot of criticism for doing this, knowing that this would potentially put Gonzalo Lira in danger. Do you think they should have run the piece, or do you think they should have held back on it?
And well, first of all, to give some context, the SBU has been heavily criticized over the years by credible international authorities for engaging in torture and disappearance.
Right.
And I hope that nothing of the sort was done. But knowing the SBU's record, you certainly can't rule that out. I guess my question would be, if he was a popular manosphere YouTuber already, did it require the Daily Beast to get him on the radar of the SBU, or wouldn't they already have known about him? I mean, and that's a genuine question. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Well, he was. I mean, I don't know if he was all that popular as a manosphere YouTuber. I mean, this was a few years ago, and he stopped doing that actually several years ago, prior to even the invasion. But they just talked about that a lot, as instead of actually addressing his claims about the invasion, they instead just kind of went on this giant smear piece, and listen, Gonzalo Lira is not somebody that I agree with on much, I have to say. Like, his views on the manosphere stuff and women, I find pretty piggish, quite frankly. Also, he has some really controversial views when it comes to the Chilean government. He is, like I mentioned, a descendant of the Carrera family. That family is very prominent in Chile. Now the descendants are in the hundreds, and they pretty much run Chile. I mean, they're the aristocrats. So his viewpoints, they're not exactly what I mean. I don't agree with many of his viewpoints, but nonetheless, is that deserving of him to be thrown to the SBU? Should the Daily Beast have written this article knowing that this guy is not that popular, but then he suddenly became on their radar? Is that something that they should have done? Or, that's where it gets tricky. It's like, do you as a journalist call attention to things? I don't know if their piece was really what I would consider like excellent journalism or anything, just talking about his manosphere stuff. But do you call attention to it knowing that there could be danger for that person? Or do you couch it because of that potential danger to that person? What do you do?
Here's what I despise about the media industry right now. It's that normal readers, normal people cannot parse through this BS, and unless you spend tons of time, like Kim putting together this entire radar and researching every individual case, there's no reason to trust that the Daily Beast's piece is going to be fair or accurate. And at the same time, there's no reason to trust that this random YouTuber, that his rendition of the facts is going to be fair and accurate. Right. So it's like, what is a normal person supposed to do? And it's like the entire Libs of TikTok controversy last week. I actually completely agree with people who say like it's fair game to show up as a journalist at people's houses, and it's fair game to like. People on YouTube and TikTok are hugely influential now. They're extremely influential, and for some good reasons. It's sort of really democratized the media landscape. So that means also that they're fair game for scrutiny, but at the same time, that scrutiny is often, like Taylor Lorenz, in such bad faith. It is done with such incompetence, and it is done in a way that is not, helpful to readers. And I feel like this is another situation exactly like that. And it just sucks to be a normal person who relies on the media, who doesn't have, hours a day to spend researching this stuff on their own. It leaves you in a terrible place.
Well, and this guy has much more potential severe consequences than Taylor Lorenz, than the TikTok Right. So in the SBU, as Ryan mentioned, known for torturing and disappearing people and much worse things. And so, but Gonzalo Lira is alive. A lot of people were very worried about him for a very long time. Again, he can't talk about it, so we don't know what happened to him because apparently there's still an active investigation. He must still be under, they must be looking at him as potentially a spy of some kind for Russia. And so, it's a very what a time, right? And both sides are doing that. Russia's detaining dissenters. Ukraine is, this is what happens in war. And the voices that are out there, the truth doesn't get really heard as easily because people are being detained. But I thought this, particularly with the Daily Beast, it was an interesting question on whether or not they should have called attention to this guy that didn't have that big of a following prior to all of this happening. Yeah. Now he's much more well known.
Right.
Yeah.
And alive, which is good.
And alive, right. Thank goodness for him and all of his loved ones.
Well, thank you, Kim. And we will have more Rising right after this.